You are listening to The Central Cast, a podcast for mystics and misfits just like you, recorded every week in Pasadena, California, before a live audience. Thanks for tuning in. All right, thanks, Max. I never remember how to lift this thing. Oh, right here? Yeah, got it. It's still difficult. There we go. Okay, cool. Well, welcome to 2026, everybody. I was really hoping this year would be different than the last, but the fact is we are at war, or we finished being at war with Venezuela pretty quickly, right? But we've taken over the country. I'm reminded of the old joke, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Well, in this case, it's meet the new year, same as the old year to some extent, right? But joking aside, the question is, how do we cope with this new year? How do we cope with this reality and move into the new year with the right focus, the right energy, and the right perspective? One of the therapeutic techniques I do as a chaplain with patients is I lead them in what's called a life review. And what that means is we talk about, in as much as they want to talk about, their lives, what transpired, what regrets they have, what joys they had, whatever they want to share with me. Often it revolves around their families, their careers, where they moved, big life changes, those kinds of things. And we do that with people who are on hospice and dying because it can be a really meaningful experience to look back, take stock. And so this morning, I just want to, do more of a conversation than a sermon or a talk by me, and engage in a little bit of a life review of 2025. Some of you are probably like, please no. And I get that. I don't want to force it, and this could be a very short conversation maybe. But I thought it was healthy. I thought maybe it was the right approach for this year. For this Sunday, being the first Sunday of the year, and 2025 being what it was. And so I want to do that here with you this morning, if possible, so that maybe, just maybe, we can move into the new year with the right perspective, maybe the right energy, the right focus, maybe with some wisdom, some peace, perhaps. I don't know. What have we learned about ourselves? What have we learned about our community, ourselves individually, collectively in 2025? I'm interested in hearing that. With all the challenges we faced, both individually and collectively, I think it's important to recognize that the year 2025 began with the Eaton and the Palisades fire, right? In fact, the anniversary of that is this week, Wednesday and Thursday. I think the fire started the evening of the 7th, right? And then the morning of the 8th is when the greatest toll was taken, specifically up here in Altadena, just literally a couple miles that way up Fair Oaks, right? Many of us know people who lost their homes. Emily and I certainly do, because Lucy's school, Sophie wasn't at Odyssey South at that point, but Lucy's school burned down. And Max, your kid's school burned down. And I think in some ways Lucy is still kind of coming to terms with that. And just this last year, she started having panic attacks. And I think, I'm not saying it's all related to that, but I do wonder. It's a traumatic thing for an 8-year-old kid to have their school that they loved burn down. And Emily and I think a month or two after the fires, drove up there for the first time to see Altadena, and we took the kids. Now I'm thinking that was a mistake, but that was a big part of the beginning of last year for us as a community that lives around this area, or even all of Los Angeles, I think was vicariously traumatized by seeing what was happening in Pacific Palisades and Altadena. This town is forever changed. We're forever changed. And that's how the year began. And then it felt like, at least to me, like 2025 never took its foot off the pedal. It just was, one thing after another. I had lunch on Friday, so 2 days ago, with a friend who is a retired hospice chaplain. He was my mentor, actually, for the position I'm currently in. And he's coping with the 1-year anniversary of losing his home. He and his husband had a home up in Altadena. And, I asked him, so what are you doing this week to cope with that? Like, what are you going to do? What's your plan? He's like, I am going to Mammoth to go skiing. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to, and it's not like he hasn't done the work of dealing with it. It's been a year of dealing with it. He's like, I just want to go enjoy myself. I'm not going to let this get me down. I'm moving. I had plans to go skiing up in Mammoth in January. I'm still doing that. And I found that inspiring. I'll give this a second. Go by. And I think that's a testament to his own strength. And I find that inspiring. And again, he was a hospice chaplain too before he retired. And we discussed on Friday over lunch how being a chaplain, a hospice chaplain, not hospital, hospice, right? So meeting with the dying in their homes, how that prepared him to deal with his own trauma and his own grief and his own loss. And he talked about how it absolutely has done that. I think meeting with people who are dying or who are dealing with loss and are facing death or dealing with grief, family members dealing with grief of losing a loved one, doing that as work, I think does kind of prepare you in some ways to deal with loss and trauma in your own life. And so I want to share with you this morning a little bit about the wisdom that he has in this moment, looking back over 2025 and losing his home. One of the things that struck me was that for those who lost their homes, it's not just that they lost their abode, not that just they lost where they lived and they lost the stuff in their house, but they lost their former lives. There really is grief there about losing what your life once was. And he talked to me about how really the way that he copes with that is he tells himself what he tells others going through great loss and grief. And what it is, it's not like everything's going to be okay or that, hey, you just need to get over it. But one of the biggest pieces of wisdom that he has and that I have to offer others and myself is that it won't always feel this way. It won't always feel this acute. The overwhelming feelings of grief and loss and the fear of all that, those feelings will diminish. I'm not saying they'll go completely away and you won't be haunted by it from time to time, but there's something quite profound in this idea, this little piece of wisdom that it won't always be this overwhelming and this acute. And you can rebuild. In other words, you can find the strength to move on. You can find hope. You will feel better. And that's really powerful. And to some, maybe that sounds like thin soup, but I don't think it is. I think there's something quite profound about that message that it won't always feel this way. And you can rebuild. You can move on. And what's profound about his circumstance is that he and his husband are actually rebuilding in Altadena. They're in the process of rebuilding right now. They're finishing the work with the architect. And again, I find that immensely inspiring. He's a retired man. He's in his 60s and he's rebuilding. And that's profound. That's the wisdom he's tapping into right now. And I think that's wisdom that all of us can benefit from. And it's, again, wisdom that was hard won. It's not easy. It's hard won over many years, meeting with the dying and those who are grieving and have lost loved ones. But this is how 2025 began, right? At least for those of us in the LA area. And again, I feel like 2025 started off on that foot and then never took its foot off the gas. So many local and national crises being generated by the regime. Many of us marched in the spring and June. Julie, that's when you came on board with us. Like, hit the ground running. We were in downtown LA. Anna, you were there. Others, afraid of getting arrested. We almost did, Crazy. Yeah. June was crazy. Scary. And there's more times like that coming probably, right? We sold our church building in March. That was kind of a big event. We sold our church building. And we moved twice, once into Casa Nueva Verdugo, and then here in September. Those were monumental changes for this community, right? Let's take stock of that for a minute. We've been through a lot this year, individually, collectively, communally, right? We've been through a lot. It's been a crazy year. And I'm curious to hear this morning what comes to your mind. What events, personally or collectively, have happened that affected you in the last year or that you feel are important to mention? What's going on in our bodies? What's going on in your body over the last week as the year transitions? What's going on in your bodies this morning? What are we feeling physically? What are you feeling emotionally? Or maybe, what are the spiritual implications you think that are going on in your life or in our lives for what's happened? But what are you thinking about regarding the last year? What events affected you? What do you want to mention this morning? Yeah, Julie.
I've been doing a lot of reflecting. Actually, I went through all my photos for the last year, and it took a long time. I take a lot of photos. Most of them are of my dogs. And in my reflecting, I was reminded of things that I did in the past year that I didn't think I was strong enough to do, particularly for the brief time that I worked in the hospital, and I was actually handling dead bodies. And I am also a part-time hospice chaplain, and I'm like, I minister to the dying. I sit with grieving families, but I never thought I could actually touch a dead body and be okay with it. And then I got to the point where I would sit with dead bodies, like alone in the basement of the hospital next to the morgue. I mean, this is like horror movie kind of stuff for me, I thought, but I would talk to those who had recently deceased. And I still don't know how to understand that, but it felt like the natural thing to do. But I've been reflecting, Aaron, on like things that I've done that I thought would kind of crumble me. I thought I would have a panic attack. I also have had panic attacks for decades. And so I was reflecting like how much strength I saw in myself this past year. And like that was the first theme that I got. And it feels good to look back and be like, "Oh, I'm stronger than I thought I was." And then it's not a but really, it's really an and like all of us, no matter how strong we are, shit hurts. Like it doesn't, I guess what I realized is strength doesn't mean you don't hurt. It doesn't mean you don't lose days of work. It doesn't mean you don't need to take care of yourself. It's in fact like identifying as strong can almost be a hindrance for some of us because we feel like if we were strong, we like, I don't know, wouldn't have to take care of ourselves, wouldn't have to miss a day of work, wouldn't have to this or that. And so, I don't know, that was my biggest reflection is that kind of the two sides of the coin of like, we are strong and that doesn't mean that that we are not vulnerable.
Yeah. Good stuff. Thank you for sharing your experience. Yeah, Jose.
Yeah, kind of adding on to what Julie said. I think I've been doing a lot of reflecting over the last couple of weeks. Like post-Christmas, New Year is always so interesting for that. And I think it's a very similar conclusion that I've come to of where like if I had to say like if I had to encapsulate the year, I would say the word that comes to mind is perseverance. Not just with myself, because it was a very similar thing with me too, where it was like these great big challenges happened that I didn't think I could face, and I did, and to surprise to myself. But also, I think just as a whole, as a people, as a human race, especially as Americans, we face so much this year that I think should have kept us down, right? I mean, who thought this guy was going to get in power a second time, right? And that was morally debilitating and like that was a big hit, but we gathered ourselves and we immediately went to work to ensure that people understood that like we weren't going to let this happen again, and we weren't going to stand by. And like you said, it feels like since the fires, it's been nothing but thing after thing after thing. And we're starting I mean, I woke up yesterday to that was the first thing I saw was the US invaded Venezuela and captured Maduro. And I was like, it's 9 a.m. I just got up. This is crazy. And so, I think perseverance though was the key. And I think that I really liked what Julie said, that was the big thing that I had to learn this last year, was because, I've started like my journey with therapy. And one of the things that my therapist and I talk about a lot is that I think it's a really tough thing to be someone who intellectualizes your mental health, but then also someone who's suffering it and is going through it. And so it's like this constant thing of like, when things happen to you, you go, well, I recognize why I'm doing this, right?
Yeah.
But you're still going through it. And so one of the biggest things for me was learning that like being strong doesn't mean not feeling things. It means taking the time to sit with the feeling and sit with the thought, and yeah, you can intellectualize your way through it and be like, I recognize that what is happening is temporary and it'll go away, but you sometimes need to sit with it. Yeah. I think that's true strength. I just watched a movie last night, which if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. Wake Up Dead Man.
Okay.
The Rian Johnson. It's like the third in the Knives Out trilogy. But it was such a surprising film because I knew it takes place around a murder in a Catholic church. But really at its core, the movie is sort of this like open letter to faith. Yeah. And it's a really, and I'd have to look into whether or not Rian Johnson grew up in Catholicism or in the faith in some way, because it's kind of these 3 points, these 3 parts, where you have someone who is completely like an atheist in Daniel Craig's character, Benoit Blanc. Then you have Josh O'Connor's character, who's very much like a progressive, left-leaning, like new wave Catholic. And then you have Josh Brolin, who's like old school conservative, like radicalized Catholic Christian. And it was such an interesting film. And in my reflections and thinking about perseverance and everything, one of the key things for me this last year was this faith journey. And I think I've talked with some of you about it, that it's like, I think in the past I would have come to the realization that like, well, I don't belong in Catholicism, and that would have been that. And I would have just walked away and maybe never prayed again, or just had this little inkling in the back of my mind. But one of the things that there's a million quotes from this movie that really stood out. One of them was, and I'm going to butcher it, but when Daniel Craig and Josh O'Connor are talking about faith, Daniel Craig's character tells him, well, this is storytelling, and Josh O'Connor's character, Father Judd, says, yes, it is all storytelling. The costumes and the ceremony and everything is storytelling. But the question that we must ask ourselves is, are we doing this, or are we selling a lie, or is it touching something deep inside of us that's like a truth that you cannot move past? And he's like, and that's the point of storytelling. And there's also a line that it ends with that I in my Letterboxd review, that was like what I chose to encapsulate it with, that really resonated with me. And I think sort of encapsulate this last year for me. And I'm going to pull it up because I don't want to butcher it.
Please.
Again, it's on Netflix.
I started watching it. And then I got sidetracked, but I'm going to go back.
Again, it was very, because you have a lot of these movies that come out sometimes that focus in and around faith, and it's either way too far one way and you're like, this is cheesy, or it's way to the other one and you're like, okay, well then, just felt like that person had a thing against us. And so it was a really interesting middle ground. And again, for this series, it was surprising, I think, when the last two had kind of focused on different things. But the line is, it's the very end, the resolution, no spoilers, but he says, some got their miracle, not being cured or fixed, but finding that the sustaining power to wake up every day and do what we're here to do in spite of the pain, daily bread.
Can you read it again?
Yeah. Some got their miracle, not being cured or fixed, but finding the sustaining power to wake up every day and do what we're here to do in spite of the pain.
Yeah.
Daily bread.
That's good.
And at the beginning of the movie, he has to go before this like sort of council of older priests, and they tell him, because he gets into an argument with a fellow priest, and they tell him, which I think is part of what the thinking that got me away from the Catholic Church was, that they tell him like, we're here to fight the world, not each other. And he goes, no. If you're gonna think that way, He says, once you start seeing wolves, once you start calling it fighting wolves, then everyone who disagrees with you is going to be a wolf, right? And he says, Christ came to heal the world, not fight it. And he says, we need to do less of this, more.
Mm.
And I just really, really resonated with that. And it just made me think of my past year where it was like, that's sort of what I felt I've gone through. And I think that's sort of what I've seen us go through, is that despite all these hard things that happen to us, I am blown away by humanity's ability to persevere in the face of adversity and to continue to show compassion. And I think Central has been a place that really shown me that. And I'm glad to be able to join you guys. And it gives me faith that there is other people with like-minded opinions that continue to see that compassion, because it is easy to be hardened by the world, and it is easy to see when bad things happen to be like it's us versus them mentality. And I have been really, really touched to see that not the whole world thinks that way.
Well,
so
man, preach. You just did. No, that was really good, Jose. Thank you. And what I heard in all of that was like, this is what it looks like for you to find hope, to find strength. This is what it looks like for you to lean into love and to find the energy and the life power to face tomorrow and face 2026 and beyond. That's awesome. And I'm inspired by that. Thank you. That was really good.
Yeah, one of the first times I came to Central, I think when we were doing a prayer, I think you said, God of hope and love. And that really just stuck with me.
Wow.
Because I was like, I never thought of it that way. Like, he is the God of hope and love.
Yes.
And that's been like my mantra since, is like hope and love, I think, are the two most important things that we as humans should follow, but I think especially as Christians.
Yeah, absolutely. That's powerful. Thank you. Somebody else want to share this morning where you're at? Yeah, Anna.
I started out 2025, the first few months overseas. And so then, which was really good to experience different places.
But you were in Eastern Europe, Bulgaria.
Yeah. Which was great. America was completely decentered, and it was so refreshing not to understand like a word of like other people's conversations. And just, if you traveled, like things are done very differently and oftentimes better, maybe not all the time, but then, so I would say being there was great. But then, it was January and it felt really weird not to be in Los Angeles. And I'm like, looks like a war zone. It's crazy. And then was in Europe, and then for a little bit was visiting like family in the Midwest before coming back to Los Angeles in late May. And then was coming back, and LA was on fire again with all the regime stuff going on. And it felt very strange to be back, but I would say for the rest of 2025, just being so full of gratitude to just, like, I'm not a native Angelino, but I just felt really a sense of belonging, like here in our community, but also just being really grateful. Like, if I have to be back in America, like there's no place I'd rather be than Los Angeles. Like I said, this community, like my East LA neighborhood and our neighbors, just the love, I think, that everyone in our city, not everyone, but like the love that we are very good at, I think, as a city of being there for each other and showing up and fighting where we can fight and loving where we can love. Can find a lot to complain about wherever you are, but again, just was very grateful to be back here.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for that perspective. Anyone else? A passage that I end up reading a lot to hospice patients that I still find profoundly meaningful, and a passage that I actually read here last year, the Sunday after the Eaton fire, is from Romans chapter 8, and I pretty much have it memorized at this point. In Jose, what you were saying about resonating with this idea of a God of hope and love, that's what this passage is actually about. And it comes from Romans chapter 8, and it says, and some of you are going to be familiar with this, but In all of these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. Now, what I take away from that passage is that we have an unbreakable connection to this God of hope and love. And however you understand God as the ultimate source of love, of the depths of peace, of being itself, of life itself, however you conceive of the divine, ultimate reality, whatever, you have an unbreakable connection to that. And that, I believe, is the ultimate source of our strength, our hope, whatever can propel us through difficult times. It's that conviction, that love and solidarity and mutuality and collective action, that the care and the concern, the love that we have for each other, this is what carries us through. And this is how, as similar Grace put it, she says that God is other people, which I take to mean that God is love for her, right? God is the sense of connection, the deep sense of connection that she has with others. That's what I take out of that passage. This God of hope and love. God is love. Love is God, right? There's this interchangeable relationship with that. And for me, and what I hear you saying, that the underlying foundation of it all is that what can carry us through anything, fires, the regime, whatever, it's love, and it's our sense of connection to each other and the depth of meaning that we can take out of those things and that we find in those things. And as we move ahead into 2026, let's just double down maybe on our investment in those things, in community, in our care and concern for each other, whatever connects us more to each other and to the world around us. And that deepens our sense of that connection and care and concern and mutuality. Whatever we can do to foster that is how we're going to get through whatever this year holds or beyond. This is truth. This is life, I think. So I hope that works for you. Yeah. And thank you for being here this morning. And thank you to all of you that listen to the podcast later. Let's conclude our formal time together here with our benediction. Let's say this together now. As we go from this place, we commit ourselves to the path of love, honesty, and humility. We dedicate ourselves, as Christ did, to the cause of justice and the courageous embrace of this life, this world, and each other. Amen. All right, everybody. Happy 2026. Thanks for being here. Yes, Bob.
First is that next Sunday we'll be for our congregational meeting here, which you can join online if you're not here. You can be a part of that as well. And to come to that, it won't be very long because we still
12:15.
So we'll get some portos for us too. So if you don't come to the meeting, come to us. And then the other thing is, I love everything about the seminar event. It's just one thing: he drinks Coors Light. I have most of the 30 of the silver bullet in the back of my trunk. So if anyone here is a Coors Light fan, or you want it on the lawn or anything like that, let me know, because I have 30 silver bullets in my trunk that I'm looking at.
They call them dirty 30s. Okay.
That's funny.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I didn't know you were in here. Thanks for listening in on this week's edition of the Central Cast. Hope you enjoyed it and hope you join us next time. Bye-bye.